Welcome to the Boilermaker Breakdown. I'm your host, Ethan Woody, joined today by my friend Joey Hartzell, my co-host. How you doing, Joey?
I'm doing good. Rough kind of watch with the USC game, even though there was some hope. It was nice to kind of enjoy watching football again.
Absolutely. You can't deny this Purdue team is a lot more fun than we were a year ago. No matter how the results play out from here, football is fun again for the first time since the Jeff Brom era, and that is good to see. So, as Joey alluded to, we'll be kind of breaking down the first three games of the season, kind of talking about what we've seen, and then projecting forward what we expect to see. We'll do a little mini preview of the Notre Dame. It's coming up in a couple of days. And yeah, I think that's the plan for today.
Yeah, I kind of wanted to talk a little bit about that USC game first, kind of in specific. Just I feel like that's kind of the best way to talk about the opening, just because those first two games. I mean, Ball State was just. I, as a Western Michigan student, cannot wait for Western Michigan to play Ball State in MAC play. After watching that, there's nothing about that team that I think really kind of makes me fear them, especially when you're talking on the Purdue side of things, Power Five level. That team really didn't have anything for Purdue. Southern Illinois, I thought was better. I thought it was a well coached team, well put together team. Looked like a team that's been playing together for a while, but they just didn't have the size. They didn't have the athleticism. They didn't have the ability to really kind of keep up for 60 minutes. So I think that USC game is definitely where you see a lot of the takeaways.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, while we were getting kind of beat up in the fourth quarter against USC, Ball State was struggling with some FCS team. I didn't see which one, but they pulled away for like a 7-point win in the fourth quarter. So yeah, there was not a lot to take away from the Ball State game, and we all kind of knew that going in, and then it was confirmed as it's kind of playing out. Southern Illinois, probably a better coach team, but again, like an FCS team, even a good FCS team is not really a good barometer for a Power Four program and kind of what we can expect against Big Ten teams. USC, though, one of those teams that this, probably a bowl team this year. I think after the Purdue win, they got to number 25 in the rankings, so they're a ranked team now. But they're not expected to compete at the top of the league, so it was a good way to see, like, this is a team that, on paper is better pretty much at every position, but it's not quite like an Ohio State or a Penn State where, we just kind of go in thinking we have no chance. And it kind of played out kind of that way where we were somewhat competitive throughout the game, but it never really felt like we were a serious threat to win. Is that kind of how you saw things as well?
Yeah, a little bit. It honestly kind of reminded me about of the Illinois Duke game almost a little bit, where it was kind of like one team is clearly better, but the other team, kind of Purdue in this situation was able to hang around just a little bit, but just kept shooting themselves in the foot. Like when they had USC continuously gave Purdue a chance to really make the game a game and kind of interesting, and Purdue never quite took that chance to put any real game pressure on USC. And I kind of think that that's kind of what I got. It was a gettable game for sure. Probably shouldn't expect to win that. You definitely would have needed help down the stretch. But the one thing that stood out to me was the ability for a defense that kind of looked overmatched against a really talented offense, was able to string together a lot of like bend, don't break possessions, forcing a lot of field goals down the stretch, which almost felt like a stop against that USC offense. And I think gave the Purdue offense a chance, and just a couple turnovers late really hurt. Put yourself in a hole early. But I had a lot of positive takeaways, honestly.
Yeah, I feel like I come away from that USC game of two minds. On the one hand, I'm probably more worried about the defense than I was going in. I think kind of on paper coming into the season, a lot of us felt like the defense, we kind of know what to expect. They'll be solid, but not amazing. And we had a lot more questions on the offensive side of the ball. Through three games, I feel the opposite. I think the offense has a fairly high floor. Going to be high variance too, given Ryan Brown and his play style, but um, they're going to get yards. They're going to be able to get first downs. They'll get it into the end zone. They'll put up points. I don't think we'll see too many games to see where we score in 20, except maybe against Ohio State and Michigan. On the other hand, the defense through three games has been an issue. They've had some stands in the red zone. Obviously, got shut out against Ball State, but for the first quarter, Southern Illinois was really able to march up and down the field on this defense with very, very little resistance. And eventually they got that figured out. But that's a very worrying sign against an FCS team that, in theory, no matter how well coached they are, should not be able to match our athletes on the field. And then against USC, the only reason they stopped scoring as much is because they stopped trying to. Like once they got into the fourth quarter and they didn't really feel like they needed to run up a score, they kind of eased off the gas a little bit. And like you said, kind of those field goals started feeling like stops, which if your opponent's kicking a field goal and you feel good about that, that's really kind of not a great sign for what your defense has been doing all game.
Yeah, I think for me, it's more so like I see this specific iteration of Barry Odom's defense kind of being a little overmatched on the personnel side of the things. I don't really think this is a defense that's going to be able to just man up, outmatch you. But it gives me a lot of faith in the system, I think, going forward. I think this is going to be a well-coached defense as long as Barry Odom's here. I think you get a little bit more talent in this system next year. And like, it gives me a lot of hope going forward. It gives me a lot of faith that this is just a well-coached football team. Like, just kind of reiterates that. And that's really where I think I'm coming from here, is more so like, I kind of knew this defense was going to be overmatched against anybody with really that much of a pulse offensively in a man-up perspective. But schematically, I feel like this Purdue coaching staff is able to go toe-to-toe with a lot of these offensive coaches in a way that, like, even with Walters being a defensive guy, I didn't really feel that way last year. Like, it just kind of felt like chaos last year on the defensive end, and I don't feel that way at all on this defensive end, even with a rather limited personnel.
Yeah, I mean, I think because of how bad last season went, it kind of went under the radar. We had as like a sneaky talented defense in some ways. It was like our cornerback room where obviously major weaknesses all year, but we know how good Dylan Thieneman was and still is at Oregon. Will Helps was this like high profile transfer who's maybe the best. Dabo Swinney saying he's the best player on Clemson's defensive line with 2 projected top 5 picks.
And he's like, I think going off of that, the film I kind of agree with that. Like, he's all over the place for Clemson the first few weeks, even in losses, he's everywhere. I mean, he's strong in the run. They're dropping him back into coverage, and he's disruptive. Just overall very impressive. There was a lot of talent last year on Purdue's defense.
Yeah, absolutely. Who's the defensive tackle that transferred to Texas?
It's not Jamarian Harkless, is it?
No, he's still on the team. I'm looking at the Texas roster now.
Cole Brevard. He's one of the best run defenders in the SEC right now. I mean, he's gotten a few shutouts on NFL draft shows, just as maybe a late round run stuffing defensive tackle. He's like 340 pounds, and he's like destroying double teams against Ohio State. He was transferred from Purdue last year, so not to get too into the weeds of last year's roster and the guys we don't have anymore, but it kind of goes to show you how much coaching really does matter. I don't know, like those 3 guys. I don't know if we have anyone on this defense as good as any of them. And it's already playing better, despite, like you said, Walters being a defensive guy who's got Washington's defense looking great. For whatever reason, when he was at the top here at Purdue, he just did not have his guys ready to play. And it's really refreshing to see guys motivated to come out and suit up for Barry Odom. I completely agree. And I think talking about that defensive line, I kind of want to shout out Barry Odom, because I feel like the defensive line lost probably the most out of any position group this year in the transfer portal with the amount of talent that actually left. I thought the defensive line has kind of been the bright spot on the defense so far through 3 weeks. The defensive line's actually somewhat disruptive this year. I feel like they've gotten after the quarterback a decent amount. They're definitely not just getting pushed around in the run game. I don't feel like USC really was able to move them around the way that I've seen teams get moved around before. I think the defensive line, I know you've got the PFF data in front of you, but if you want to speak a little more to that, if that's kind of backing up what my eyes are seeing. But that's kind of what I got through the first 3 weeks, honestly, was the defensive line.
Yeah, the defensive line is grading pretty well in our system. You mentioned Jamarian Harkless earlier. He's the highest graded of them all, the 71.5. Sort of just that sort of Cole Brevard-esque run stuffer in the middle, but he's got a little more pass rushing juice than I think Brevard has. He's been in the backfield a few times. He's making some plays. CJ Nunnally, DeMarco Kennedy, TJ Lindsey, all above 70. So, definitely on our defense, the defensive line is the position group that's kind of standing out. And, for as much as we can complain about how easy it has been for teams to march up and down the field on our defense. The defensive line is kind of checking run games pretty well. We haven't really seen a lot of explosive running against this team, maybe a little bit from the quarterbacks, but on designed runs, it's not really been an issue for us as much as it has been like preventing chunk plays in the passing game.
Yeah, and I think that at least kind of solidifying one side of the ball makes it somewhat easier for a defensive mind to kind of to figure some things out going forward. I think you'll see a good coaching staff make some adjustments down the stretch of the season. Ideally, that kind of pass defense makes it a little more difficult. I just want to see kind of more of a I want to see less chunk plays. That's the big thing to me is that it's so easy. It feels like every single drive, this defense gives up a 20, 25-yard completion. And then all of a sudden, you at the very least, if nothing else, the opposing offense has already flipped the field on you. They already are winning the field position battle. And that it can be a big thing when you're not going to be able to just blow teams out of the water. Purdue's not going to be able to just walk in and beat people. So doing things like winning the field position battle are huge for this football team. And I think that when you give up these chunk plays every single drive, that's just not going to happen.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of a damned if you do, damned if you don't, because for as good as our run defense has been, our pass rush hasn't really been all that effective. And if you want to the ideal way to play pass defense is to be able to rush 4 guys and get pressure with 4 so you can drop 7 in coverage and play zone. And, that's the ideal, and very few defenses actually, especially in college, have the personnel to actually do that. But even just being able to confidently say, we can get a 4-man rush sometimes and feel pretty good that our zone defenders are going to hold up. I don't know if you can really say that with this team, which means, you can rush 3 and drop 8, at which point you're just kind of letting the quarterback sit back there as long as he wants and wait for someone to eventually come open. Or you're trying to draw up some blitzes and bring extra rushers. But if you don't get home quickly, that's going to leave somebody wide open. And I think that's what we're kind of seeing now is a lot of these chunk plays. It starts with vanilla defenses on early downs where they're just trying to prevent big plays. But because we have no pass rush, they're able to kind of sit back and find a crosser over the middle or some linebacker or safety who didn't properly pick up a seam route, giving up a big play. And then they're trying to bring extra rushers to kind of hurry up the quarterback, and that's leaving gaps in the defense.
And that's kind of where I'm looking for some of these guys who have some limited experience on the defensive line. I think to a D'Amico Kennedy or even like a CJ Madden type guy who really hasn't seen a ton of snaps but has some kind of more raw talent. I think if one of those guys really gets going in the pass rush, this defense kind of has a different feel to it to me a little bit. Because all of a sudden you kind of take a little bit of pressure like you were talking about off of a secondary linebacker group that has struggled in coverage at times, even with some of the more productive players on the team. So I just think that one of those guys getting going is kind of the key for this defense that I could see happening this year. Down the line, though, it really excites me because I think this defense has a lot of potential under Barry Odom.
Absolutely. I mean, the PFF, grading data backs that up. Our pass rush is by far the weakest grading wise. Our highest graded week was in week 1 against Ball State at a 62. Just not good enough. And coverage is actually grading out fairly well, which might surprise people a little bit. Did not grade out well against USC, but it did in the first 2 weeks. And, that's going to be kind of a give and take. We have, a couple of corners who can make some plays. Tony Grimes is the veteran, coming over with Barry Odom. And, he hasn't been amazing or anything, but he's held his own at least. Smiley Bradford in the slot. He's not an every down player, but he plays some safety, plays some slot defender. He's our highest graded defender so far. And, even Hillary Hines made some plays last week, kind of pushing, Ryan that other outside spot. So, we have some bodies there like we haven't the last couple of years, which gives you a hope that over time they're able to gel a little bit and maybe make some more plays.
Agree. I completely agree with that. The corners are kind of my second bright spot on the defense. I think with this defense, you kind of have to almost separate the secondary because I do think that the corners have actually been pretty solid. Tony Grimes, like you talked about, nothing special, but it's just kind of it's nice to have just a solid, good corner who you can kind of trust to not be an idiot. He's he's not gonna make a dumb play. He's not gonna take a bunch of bad penalties. You're not gonna see him just get completely picked on the entire game. But he's not. I mean, he's not Jalen Ramsey. He's not Darrell Revis. He's not going to just completely isolate the number one receiver and shut him down. But that's not what Purdue needs. And I do kind of think that, like, you talk about Smiley Bradford, Hadari Hines. I do think those guys have also they've been around the football, which is something I think I look for in defensive backs. Like, you kind of always see their names coming up in like the run game and stuff like that, which is a big deal to me. I think they're coming down and kind of supporting the linebacker crew that's very inexperienced and could use some help in that department. And so I think that the corners have been really good. It's the safety group in my mind that really kind of struggles in the pass coverage department, and that's why you see these big plays getting kind of blown up, is because the guys on the back end who are responsible for preventing that have really just kind of struggled entirely outside of kind of stopping the run. I know you talked about his name escapes me right at the moment.
Yeah, I mean, safety's been an issue. It's tough. So, starting at safety is Taj Rael, who made headlines over the summer coming over from Memphis for the wrong reasons. And then Miles Slusher, been around the football a lot, but has not graded particularly well. He's struggled in coverage and run support. Gave up a lot of big plays against USC. Really the middle field defense, I think, has been the major issue for Purdue. We're not seeing these like one-on-one receivers down the sidelines, like mossing our corners on jump balls. It's typically guys coming free over the middle of the field, either on crossers or deep posts, where safeties and linebackers are not playing correctly. They're not picking up receivers coming through their zones properly. They're not matching. If there's robber rolls or seam match assignments, they're just not doing their jobs properly. And there's a couple players in particular who have been particularly bad at this. Taj Rael, the safety, and Charles Correa, the linebacker, have given up a ton of just chunk play after chunk play after chunk play in the passing game, which is, like you said, like teams are flipping the field. It feels like every drive there's a 20, 25-yard pass play, usually pretty early on in the drive. This style of defense without those standout players, without like a George Karlaftis on the defensive line, you can just end a drive with a pass rush. Like this style of defense, where you have you have some good, not great players, and around them you have some okay, not good players. You need to force teams to march down the field. And when we get to talking about Purdue's offense, I'm going to touch on this as well. The more plays they have to run, the more opportunities for mistakes they have to make. Right. If you're able to make a defense, and then this style of defense, Barry Odom's system is designed to do this, right? Take away everything deep, take away the big plays, force a team to march down the field in 12, 15 plays to get a touchdown. Because odds are at some point they won't convert a third down and they'll settle for a field goal or have to punt. And you can't do that if your linebackers and safeties aren't able to contain tight ends and receivers over the middle of the field.
And I think, kind of adding on to that, you look at the schedule ahead of Purdue, there aren't a ton of offenses that I feel like are just going to be able to march consistently up and down the field on people. I mean, you talk about, like, even when you look at that Michigan game, yes, I do think that Michigan is going to outmatch Purdue at quite a few positions. However, that's an offense that I think you've seen some hiccups from early. They've got a true freshman at quarterback in Bryce Underwood. Sure, he's very talented, and maybe he figures it out completely by the time it gets to Purdue and they make me look ridiculously dumb. But it's still a team that you force them to run 15 plays every drive. That's just more opportunities for a freshman quarterback to throw a pick. And coming back to that, there's a lot of teams, a lot of Minnesota's, Northwestern, Rutgers. Are those three teams going to be able to really consistently churn out 16-play touchdown drives, no matter who they're playing, really at the college level? I don't know if I'm going to buy that. So I think that this kind of these safeties being able to step up and specific and limit these big plays, I think more so than the linebackers. I think it's like the safeties are the ones who really, if they step up and start making a few plays and just kind of being more solid in general, and more limiting mistakes, I think this defense kind of has like a floor-raising moment that it desperately is looking for.
Absolutely. I mean, like I said, the key to this defense is forcing teams to have to drive the football field on you. And like you said, there's there's some teams on here where you would question their ability to do that consistently over the course of a game. Even some of the ranked teams that we're going to be playing don't have the explosive offenses that maybe they've had in the past. So, if you're giving up those chunk plays to teams that don't often get them, or on teams that rely on them for their entire offense, you're just going to have a really tough time stopping them.
Yeah, I mean, I looked at that Notre Dame game too. That's an offense that has had inconsistencies and struggles at times, and I think that a team like Purdue, you make that offense, have to grind out 16 play drives, and all of a sudden you might find yourself in a football game you didn't expect to be in.
And that's true just generally it's not just football. The same is true in basketball and plenty of other sports as well. Like when you're the less talented team, the more you're able to shorten the game is going to help you a great deal. You see this. There's been plenty of smarter people than me who have written all sorts of think pieces on that for predicting March Madness upsets. Teams that play slower and have fewer possessions have fewer opportunities to prove that they're better, right? Which just makes logic. Like at the beginning of the game, it's 0-0. It takes the length of the game for that separation to occur, and if the game is shorter, there's less room for separation. And so, Purdue's going to be the underdog. We have 9 games left. We'll probably be the underdog in at least 7 of those. If we're going to be pulling off some upsets here to get to 4, 5, 6 wins, it's going to these games are going to have to get ugly. Purdue's not going to be winning just a clean march down the field, dime throwing 45-40 game against a team like Ohio State. If we're going to have a chance to pull another upset in a game like that, it's going to have to be like a 20-17 bloodbath in the first quarter is almost gone in one drive.
You talked about kind of that shootout style game. I want to switch to, I think, kind of the brighter half through the first 3 weeks, which is actually, I don't know if I would have said that going into the season, if I would have expected it to be kind of the brighter half of the football team. But I think that I would say with a fair amount of confidence that through the first 3 weeks, the bright spot for Purdue has definitely been the offense. I think Ryan Brown has shown some real things at the quarterback spot, albeit with some big mistakes at times. But I think that's kind of something you have to take with starting a freshman quarterback. I think Maccabee's been really kind of solid, kind of what he's been advertised as, kind of same old Maccabee. Like, the one win season last year was not Maccabee's fault. That was not because the running back position was a really lack of talent or lack of lack of buy-in. Maccabee's still there. He's still a productive back. But I think the real surprise for me is with wide receivers. I think the wide receiver group has showed multiple playmakers, multiple guys who are capable of kind of making a big play. And they also have some depth. I think it's fair to say at this point throughout the season, Purdue has established some actual depth in a wide receiver room that I haven't seen in quite some time. Even going back to the Braum era, I think about some elite one-off and two-off wide receivers where like you even have times like a pair of Milton Wright and David Bell. I can't think of like years where they had a lot of depth where you had 4 or 5 guys that you felt like there was almost no drop-off.
Yeah, the wide receivers have been spectacular. Armand Branch is Purdue's highest graded player through 3 games, 83.9. He's been spectacular. He jumped on the scene. His first catch has it against Ball State and kind of caught everyone's eye. Like, this is a guy who, coming into the year, we really didn't know what to expect. He had a lot of hype as a recruit. Didn't play last year, and there were questions of like with him, with Nitro Tuggle, there were just a few guys. There was Daniel Morissette. Like, who's going to step up and kind of be the guy? Branch is not as involved in the offense as we might have expected after that, especially after the first game, the way he sort of dominated early in that game. But he's consistently the guy they look to when they need big plays and big moments. And he can take the top off a defense. He can weave through the defense and kind of make some plays on his own with the ball in his hands. He's the standout, but it's not just him. Michael Jackson has kind of separated himself as the sort of the go-to possession guy. You need a conversion in a critical spot. He's the guy Brown's looking to. EJ Horton made some big plays last week, especially. He wasn't as involved against Ball State, but he's kind of come on as maybe that number 3. And then Nitro Tuggle didn't do a lot against Ball State, kind of like Horton, but he was a guy who was kind of seen as like this boomer bust player coming over from Georgia. Like, he was a top recruit at Georgia, sort of buried in the depth chart on a team that, for as good as Georgia's been the last couple of years, did need some buys at receiver, and he wasn't really able to step up there. There was a question with him coming over, like, is he going to be a repeat of some of the guys we had coming last year who were former like top recruits at these like big SEC schools, kind of washed out of those programs, came here and weren't able to perform either. So far, though, he's kind of been, dare I say, sort of finding the middle a little bit, where he hasn't been spectacular, but he's kind of been reliable, which is, I don't think any of, like, even the most fervent expectations for Nitro Tuggle probably wouldn't think of him as just like a reliable guy you can go to sometimes. You know?
I think also to add off of that, he's shown flashes of that kind of like explosive high level recruit. It just doesn't happen every play, but there's like once or twice a game where you see him run a route and make a catch where it's just like, wow, okay, I see the blue chip recruit. I see like where that comes from in a way that I really hope he sticks around because and I think that at the very least what Purdue has going for you is he's an Indiana kid. He's from Indiana originally, went down to Georgia, left Big Ten country, and kind of came back. So I'm hoping that got a taste of the blue chip level school. Georgia didn't really play, comes back home, finds a role, sticks around. I think this is a guy that will kind of be on the radar for a few years if he's at Purdue. And I definitely see the flashes. Like I see the talent, and I can't wait until he's able to kind of like make it all click, because I do think that there's kind of like I think there's NFL caliber athleticism and like talent there. It just kind of needs put together.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, if he's going to be a guy who's going to stick around for a couple of years, develop, it doesn't look like he's going to be, he's not above Branch or Jackson in the pecking order right now. So I don't really see, unless he takes some massive step over the course of the year into like a go-to outside NFL type of guy. He's probably not going to get as much playing time and opportunity, but I'm excited to see what he can do next year, the year after that.
Yeah, I completely agree. I just think there's so much there. It just needs to click. It just takes one kind of game where you see it click, and all of a sudden it's like, okay, yeah, I can picture this guy being wide receiver 1 at Purdue for 2 years, and then who knows where he goes after that.
Right.
And to kind of go off that wide receiver room, I just kind of think there's a lot of like kind of hope for the future in general. Like you talk about Branch, he's also a young guy. He should be back next year as well. Like there's a lot of kind of, you can see these names around for 2 or 3 years, and all of a sudden you have some continuity at a position group that you're seeing really stand out. Like you're seeing a lot of young guys stand out. You're seeing a lot of guys that can be around in 2-3 years. And that's a huge thing for me in year 1 of Barry Odom is what can he build? Like, let's build something. Let's get a foundation so that next year when you go into the portal and you look to fill some holes and you can get some difference makers, and all of a sudden you're going into the year and it's like, okay, we added a couple difference makers, and also the foundation's already there. We didn't need to bring in 75 new transfers.
Right. Yeah, I mean, there's definitely some guys here where you're kind of hopeful that they can stick around and become something. I'll touch on the running back room here for a minute. You mentioned Maccabee. In an episode we recorded that never saw the light of day, we kind of speculated that the running backs would be the engine of this offense, and we haven't really seen that, mostly because I think the wide receivers have been way, way better than we expected them to be. Maccabee is the guy, clearly, which you correctly called out in the preseason. He is sort of like the every down guy. What's been a little more surprising has been the guys behind him haven't really factored in as much as we thought they might. Malachi Thomas came over from Virginia Tech, where he was sort of like their third down back for a couple of years, next to a couple of NFL guys now, and Emmanuel Tuden. He and Antonio Harris have kind of been splitting the backup duties. They have similar numbers of snaps and carries and touches. It's kind of like just game to game, like who they decide to go with. But they're not really factoring in behind Maccabee. And again, I think it's because we have 4 receivers who we trust on the outside, and Burhan at tight end has been a little healthier than I think people thought he might be to start the season. So he's getting some touches as well. There just hasn't really been a need to go to those guys very much, and Maccabee's doing his thing and converting first downs when we need him to.
Not only that, but I also think that, especially like you talk about SIU is able to march up and down the field early. They made that game kind of a shootout early, and then doesn't even really give you a chance in your kind of one of your 2 bye games to really establish the run, really focus on running the football. And then against USC, you find yourself down in a hole early. I mean, just not very many touches to go around for running backs when you start out down 2 possessions. There's just not going to happen. You're not going to run the football very much because you got to make up a lot of points. And so I think that that's kind of part of it. I also think another reason for that is really, I think, kind of really been the dark spot on the offense, and that's the offensive line. I don't think that they've really had a ton of success from my eye, at least. I don't know how much the PFF data backs that up. That's kind of been the weakest position group, in my opinion, though, on offense, especially.
Yeah, I was going to say, let's talk about the offensive line because we definitely have a clear top guy. Joey Tenona at left tackle has been solid. Not exceptional, but 65 grade, you'll take that. The right side of the offensive line has been a problem. Back Nicoli at right tackle is our lowest graded offensive lineman. And then Ethan Trent at right guard. Bit of a mixed bag with him. We saw against Ball State when Braden Joyner, our starting center, had to exit the game. Trent moved over to center. We played Hank Purvis at right guard, and that was a bit of a disaster. That was kind of when our offense shut down for about a quarter and a half against Ball State because, I mean, Brown was under constant pressure that entire time. Trent was really struggling at center. Purvis was having problems at guard, and it really just shut down our offense. Joyner has not been exceptional by any means, but he's been a stabilizing force when he's been on the field. Is one of our most important offensive players. Tenona, Joyner, Jalen St. John at left guard is not graded particularly well in our system, our PFF system. But, I mean, he's arguably our best offensive lineman on paper. I think he'll figure things out. I mean, that left side with Tenona, St. John, and then Joyner at center is fine. The right side, though, is a problem, and it's kind of bringing the whole thing down.
Yeah, I really agree with you there, and I think that's kind of been a big reason for why the run game has struggled, and that's why you haven't seen like the running backs get a ton of touches. Especially when your wide receivers break out. Like if you don't need to run the football to win a lot of to kind of move the football on offense, if that doesn't have to be a staple of your game, there's no reason to force it when it's not working. Especially when throwing the football is working to an extent. I mean, you have a lot of your best playmakers outside of Maccabee, all of your best playmakers outside of Maccabee are all wide receivers. I don't feel as if any of the running backs behind Maccabee really kind of set out as like guys you have to find 5 touches for Antonio Harris. I don't think that he's been that guy, quite frankly. I don't think he's been explosive enough with the football. And so I think that kind of it's kind of this perfect storm of like, why would you put anyone on the field besides Maccabee? He's your best running back anyway. You don't want to run the football a ton because you're not going to be successful if you do. The times you do run the football, I think Maccabee's clearly had the most success behind that offensive line. I think his running style is the only one that's really been that successful. I think his kind of crazy style at least is able to buy you a few yards here and there, even on broken plays that kind of give you a little bit of a floor of a running game. But the offensive line has just been especially in the running game, in my opinion, too. I feel like, I don't know, I'm sure you can break this down, but I'm sure they grade out better in the pass protection than the running game. That's kind of what my eyes have shown to me.
I mean, pass protection has not been good. 54.0 pass blocking grade as a unit on the season. It's not very good. 44.3 against USC. I mean, that's just not good enough. You look at rushing grade has been pretty good overall, 75.4. That includes run blocking and rushing from the running backs. But it was a lot lower against USC. And you really start to see, even taking the grading out of this, looking at like short yardage goal line situations, the line is just not able to generate a push. Like you want those guys, like you need to get a yard. You're at the 1 yard line. Or you got like a 3rd and 1 at midfield. You want those guys to create movement off the ball, push the defense backwards, get a yard and a half for your running back of space, and they just haven't been able to do that. Pass protection has almost been worse, but the coaching staff has mitigated that in 2 different ways. One, Ryan Brown, he can run around. He's athletic. He can create some time. But they're also getting a lot of quick game concepts involved in the offense, something we didn't see a ton of the last couple of years, where it's just a couple quick reads. I think they know the pass protection is not going to hold up, and we have guys who can make stuff happen after the catch on the outside. So you need like a 3rd and 5 converted. Like Michael Jackson can run a route and get some space and get himself open. You want to create some spark plays, like find Nitro Tuggle, find Armad Branch. EJ Horton can do kind of both. Like these guys can create plays and make things happen. And there's been an emphasis on just getting the ball out of Brown's hands quickly and getting them involved in the game.
Completely agree. And I think you talk about like as much as a guarantee of 1 yard can be behind a dominant offensive line, like Michael Jackson's kind of one of those guys where it's like you need 4 yards. He's going to create separation. He's not the most explosive guy after the catch. He's not going to be I don't think he's going to be a huge big play threat for Purdue or anything, but he's just one of those guys that's like, man, he has such a knack for finding the football, finding open space, being able to spin away from defense, just kind of be there for Ryan Brown, and I think that these quick reads have kind of played also off of the offensive line, but also for a quarterback who I think for as good as he is physically at throwing the football and running the football, has struggled at times when you force him to kind of sit in the pocket and make reads. And I'm curious to see how defenses adapt to that, if they kind of are willing to allow the offensive line to give him time and kind of rush 3, drop 8 style that you talked about earlier in the video on Purdue's side of defense. I wonder if you start to see teams doing that to him to kind of force him to make reads and stay in the pocket. And I kind of worry if that happens, but I do think that on the bright side, if that does happen, like all of a sudden you see the offensive line problems start to go away. But yeah, I do agree that this kind of quick read system has really worked wonders for this offense, especially with the kind of playing off of the strengths and the limitations of this personnel.
I think it's possible you'll see defenses start to do that. But honestly, the way the offensive line is struggling to pass block right now, I think defensive coordinators are just going to be looking at their chops at the idea of sending some rushers and dialing up a blitz just to get an easy 3rd down stop with a guy right in Brown's face. And, if he can make some crazy play and throws one up, then you tip your hat to him and you're willing to try it again the next time. Because typically that's not going to work out for the offense. But you're right. Like if they decided, hey, you know what? If they want to get 5 yards on every play, kind of like we talked about with the Purdue defense, like it make them drive 12, 15 plays. I think that's where Purdue's offense is really going to struggle the most. We've relied on some chunk plays to generate offense. Like I have not been, even against Ball State, Southern Illinois, we really just haven't seen those 12, 15 play drives of 5 yards to Mockabee, 5 yards to Jackson, 10 yards to Branch, 3 yards to Mockabee. We just haven't seen that kind of methodical drive. And a lot of it is, Mockabee runs for 15 yards, then we hit a tight end for 22, and then throw a screen for 12, and all of a sudden we're in the red zone, right? Or it's, it's Branch running for 50, and then we're in the red zone, and it's 4 plays to get 5 yards. We have to settle for a field goal like that. That's kind of what the offense has been through 3 weeks, and it's fun to watch. I mean, on any given play, anything can happen, as we saw against USC. I mean, some of those sequences were just absolutely downright insane. And, entertainment value is off the charts, but it's not a sustainable way to generate yards and points. And there's a lot of potential here on this offense. But I do want to see them be a little bit more consistent down to down moving forward.
Big theme I've really noticed throughout this conversation is kind of we've talked a lot about the coaching staff and how they're maximizing kind of the personnel. And that really is kind of a very welcome conversation to be having around Purdue football. To be able to say, hey, this coaching staff is here and they're maximizing everything that they've got. It gives me a lot of belief, kind of a lot of hope, and a little bit of excitement for the rest of the season. I'm tentatively excited for this Notre Dame game, even though I feel like I should know better and should know that Notre Dame coming off of 2 losses like that are going to probably come out strong. But we can kind of parlay this into rolling into a short preview for that game. But I think through 2 games, Notre Dame has shown some actual flaws that I don't think they had last year. I think we all kind of deluded ourselves, maybe not all of us, into thinking that game might be close in early last season after a exciting win over Indiana State.
Hey, I was on the record saying that after they lost to NIU, there was 0 chance we had in that game. I mean, that just we needed them to win that game if we wanted any hope.
Well, you made a fantastic call. I would just say I think that through 2 games, I think that there have been some actual like red flags for me on this Notre Dame team. Like there are some things they haven't always moved the ball the best, and I think part of that is having a true freshman quarterback who, as much as I like him, I think is limited. I don't think that he is by any means like the physical talent that a Bryce Underwood is as a freshman. And so I think that that is a team that I think this Purdue defense could have success against. When you talk about that system of make them grind out 15 play possessions to go score, I think that's something that could work against this Notre Dame offense. I don't think that the Notre Dame offensive line has been particularly strong. They really, really struggled against Miami, and I'm not going to even attempt to compare anybody on Purdue's defensive line to like a Ruben Bain. But I don't think you need that Notre Dame offensive line to be that bad for you to have a chance at this football game. And so I think that it's one of those things where I think the weakness of Notre Dame is that offensive line. If that Purdue defensive line finds some success against an offensive line that I think has struggled early, that really kind of helps out a secondary that I don't think is going to get beat by a ton of just ridiculous CJ Carr plays. I don't think you're going to see CJ Carr spin out of pressure and make a throw 30 yards downfield to a guy that's running wide open across the middle. I don't think that's going to happen because I don't think CJ Carr is that guy yet. And so I think there's some holes in this Notre Dame team that I think Purdue could really attack. How do you kind of read this game?
I hate to sound like a Debbie Downer on this one. I don't think Purdue has really any chance in this game. Notre Dame has shown some flaws through 2 games compared to last year. I won't deny that. That also came against Miami and Texas A&M, 2 teams that might win their conferences. The way let me put it this way: USC is not as good a team as Miami or Texas A&M by a long shot.
I completely agree there.
So, it's hard to like for me to translate the weaknesses Notre Dame has shown through 2 games. Which, if we're broadening this out to like a college football conversation, I would say getting back to the playoff might be tough for them. Forget the schedule and no conference championship, but those are the 2 best games they're going to play all year, and I think they have some weaknesses against like playoff caliber teams that are showing up. Right, CJ Carr has been good but not great, and in some critical moments he's had some issues, and the Notre Dame defense has not been as good as it was a year ago, despite all the talent they have on that side of the ball. I will say I do think we can generate some yards against this Notre Dame team. We saw Texas A&M was able to kind of shred them in the secondary, and Texas A&M has some guys. Casey Concepcion, like 2 years ago as a true freshman at NC State, everyone kind of begged him, was like, "Oh, is this guy like a first-round draft pick?" And he kind of hasn't been that. But the talent is there, and look, I think the Notre Dame secondary is incredibly talented. They didn't really show it against Texas A&M. I'd expect a bounce back there. But if there is one way we can attack them, I do think some of those guys over the middle of the field, like if we can get Branch on some crossers, we can get Burhan involved in some tight end screens and try and take advantage of some of their tackling problems they had on the outside, we might be able to have a little bit of success there in offense. But the Notre Dame offensive line, struggled against Ruben Bain Jr. for Miami, struggled against Cassius Howell for Texas A&M. Cassius Howell, I mean, he had 3 top 50 picks, or I guess first 2 round picks off that Texas A&M defensive line last year in Shamar Stewart, Shamar Turner, and the Purdue transfer Nick Scorton. Cassius Howell is the best pass rusher of all 4 of those guys last year, and he's back now for Texas A&M. So it's hard for me to sit here and say, like, on paper, the Notre Dame offensive line had a couple of NFL draft prospects coming into the year, and they looked awful against Miami. Bain looks like a top 5 pick. They struggled against Texas A&M. Well, Howell's playing himself in the first-round conversation. Unless Purdue has a guy like C.J. Madden who's going to step forward and kind of be the guy who's like, I'm going to win one-on-one against these tackles that are showing some weaknesses, I don't really see how this defense does on the Notre Dame offense at all. Jeremiah Love scares me, man. Like the way that they can use him and get him in space and try to match him up against our linebackers, I think it's going to be a really long day.
Man, they got to give him the football, though. They have to, which they have, I think, struggled to at times to do that. But I definitely think I kind of painted a rosy picture for Purdue going into this matchup. I certainly don't expect a Purdue win, especially going to Notre Dame. I really don't expect a Purdue win. I do think that the way I viewed this game has completely changed in the last 3 weeks than as I did going into it, is more kind of what I was getting at. I think that going into the season, I viewed this game as like, this is an ungettable game. This is up there with going to Ohio State later in the year. Like it's just one of those games that we're not going to get. Nothing wrong with that. That happens. It's now become one of those games where it's like, yeah, I probably shouldn't win this one, but I do think there's a pathway forward, especially with a coaching staff like this. Like, hey, give your guys a chance. This style of football is kind of conducive to an underdog, as we've talked about throughout this episode. I think there's a pathway forward. I do think the one kind of big thing for me that I think this defense might have success against is you talked about the Jeremiah Love mismatch, and I really kind of agree there. I don't think that their wide receivers are going to be able to completely overwhelm the secondary. I don't think this is going to be the most talented group we see, probably not even close to the most talented group we see. I would guess that Ohio State group is probably, if I had to guess, levels above anybody else we'll see. But it's not exactly a Notre Dame wide receiver group that exactly I'm super concerned about getting beat downfield consistently by. And I think that's really – it really kind of makes me feel a little bit better about that secondary going into this game, is that, like, at the very least, they don't have guys that are really going to be able to take advantage of Purdue's biggest weakness.
Yeah, I mean, I think our secondary will be able to hold up on the outside. I think you're right about that. That's probably, on paper at least, where our defense matches up best with Notre Dame. But I mean, if Southern Illinois is able to get chunk plays over the middle against these guys, then Notre Dame, I mean, their tight ends, their slot receivers, I mean, like, they can line up Jeremiah 11 in the slot and get first downs literally whenever they want to.
If Notre Dame gets Jeremiah Love 20 touches this game, I don't think it's within 2 scores. I don't think it's within 2 scores. And I don't think it's remotely close to 2 scores. Like, I think it's a rough day for the Purdue defense. I think if Jeremiah Love sees the football 25 times on Saturday.
So let's pivot into predictions off that then. So the game opened at Notre Dame minus 26. The public seems to have bet that down. Notre Dame is currently favored by 24.5 at home. Which side are you betting in this one?
Quite honestly, I'm probably going to take Purdue to cover. This feels like a 3-score football game. I think this is a game that Notre Dame has never really, tested. I think Purdue kind of hangs around a little bit the way you saw against USC, where it's like, oh, if they score and get a stop, all of a sudden this game becomes interesting. And I don't think they ever score and get the stop. So I think it's one of those games where Purdue just kind of hangs around, but Notre Dame's not explosive enough or kind of able to overmatch Purdue enough. And I think Purdue's well enough coached that it's not going to get completely out of hand. And I think that's kind of where I read this game, as one of those, just Notre Dame cruises to an easy 2-3 score win. Purdue covers, everybody leaves happy.
This one's tricky. The line at 26, I think, was you were right to take Purdue on that number. 24.5. I think I'm going to take Notre Dame on the betting side of this. I think probably with a late backdoor cover. I think this game is going to get out of hand very quickly. The path for Purdue covering this is for a slow game, low scoring. Notre Dame goes up 14-0 in the first quarter, and then just the second quarter is just this slog where no one really scores, and Purdue's really gonna have to bother the game. If this starts getting if these offenses start humping a little bit, I have a tough time seeing Purdue covering even 24.5. And I think that's probably how this is going to go. I don't think there's much the Purdue defense can do against Notre Dame's offense. And I do think there are a few ways that Purdue can attack Notre Dame defense to at least generate a little bit of momentum. But I don't think enough to really threaten Notre Dame at any point in this game. I expect Notre Dame to be up 2 touchdowns very quickly.
Yeah, I kind of see it a little bit differently. I think game script wise, I see this as one of those games where Purdue maybe finds success early in that kind of quick route passing game. I think you see some adjustments made over after a couple of drives. Purdue maybe scores 7-10 quick points, and that Notre Dame offense responds. It feels like it might be a shootout, and then you realize Notre Dame makes a few adjustments on defense. their offense isn't that explosive kind of firepower-y offense, and Purdue's defense has enough success to really kind of slow the game down. And Notre Dame just kind of marches like forward to an easy win. I think that's kind of how I see it. I think it's close for a quarter. I think Purdue finds a little bit of success throwing the football and kind of maybe takes advantage of a missed tackle or two here or there early to make this game look a little close and maybe give a slight hint of game pressure. I just don't think that over the course of 60 minutes that this Purdue football team is going to be able to match up man for man the way Notre Dame will be able to. And there's just going to be so many guys getting beat on individual matchups that I think that it's just one of those games where Purdue just gets worn down. And that's kind of how I see this going.
Well, I think we're both agreed that Purdue doesn't have much of a shot in this one, though we seem to disagree exactly on who's going to cover. But look, if we're wrong and Purdue somehow pulls off the upset in South Bend, we'll both eat our words and kind of talk about how that might change Purdue's season.
That'd be a fantastic start to a Purdue podcast, just being like, yeah, we got no shot, and they go to South Bend and beat Notre Dame. And
I would predict Purdue to lose every game forever after that.
Yeah, I probably would
too. So real quick before we get out of here, looking past Notre Dame, let's take like 5 minutes and talk about kind of what we expect Purdue to do the rest of the season. So after Notre Dame is coming Saturday, I believe we have our bye week after that, and then we have Illinois, followed by games at Minnesota, at Northwestern, home against Rutgers, and then the absolutely brutal closing gauntlet at Michigan, home against Ohio State, at Washington, home against Indiana. Of our remaining opponents, 5 are currently ranked, and Washington could very well be ranked by the time we play them. I think they're a team incredibly undervalued right now. A team has a lot of talent. So a 3-game stretch, I think, is going to kind of define if this Purdue team is better than last year's team, or at least significantly better, is going to be at Minnesota, at Northwestern, home versus Rutgers. We'll probably be favored at home against Rutgers, potentially against Northwestern. Minnesota will definitely be favored in that game, but that's a more competitive
very
one.
gettable. Yeah,
that's a gettable game. So the question there, I'll throw to you. Kind of how we're 2-1 currently, kind of labeled 3 winnable games left on our schedule. And obviously, Boilermaker mentality, it's not impossible. We could pull an upset elsewhere. What would you set the over-under at personally for you? Like, what would you set the over-under at for wins on the year?
I think 4.5 that was the line I think I set for myself going into the season. Is kind of like, if I really want, if Odom really wanted to exceed expectations for me in year 1, let's see 5 wins. Like, you get 5 wins with the schedule, I'll be like, okay, there's really something here. I think 3-4 wins is still definitely an acceptable season for what he was given. But I kind of go 4.5. I look at it as there's really 3 games that I expect to even be like toss-up games at all, really, where Purdue isn't at least a distinct disadvantage. And that's that 3-game stretch you talked about at Minnesota, at Northwestern, and Rutgers at home. And I think that kind of the betting lines are exactly what I'd set it at. Like, I think they'll be favored on the road against Northwestern. I think that team looks abysmal. I really hope we don't lose that game. I expect that to be a win. Rutgers, I think, has at least shown like signs of life. Like, it's not just a complete hopelessness in Piscataway, but at home, that's another game that I really think that if you're I think if Odom is kind of really the guy that I get all the way behind this year, and I'm pretty excited for Odom, but I think that like that's winning those 2 games are kind of the barometer for me of like, how for real are you this year? Are you like, or were we just kind of bamboozled by the first 2 games against inferior competition, or were you actually pretty good? Like, actually not pretty good, but noticeable strides. Yeah. And Minnesota is a toss-up game. I think that that's a game that Purdue has a really good shot at winning. I really kind of want to win that game. It's kind of the big gettable one. And I still think 4.5 is the line, though, just for that reason. That line's gettable. Wouldn't shock me to drop Minnesota, but it also wouldn't shock me to kind of win one of those like last weird ones. You get Indiana at home or something. You get even Illinois in kind of like a trappy spot. Maybe have a chance there at home. Like, I think it's a team that's going to win a game they probably shouldn't and lose a game they probably should. And that game they probably should is by that Minnesota game that I see as being a loss.
Yeah, I'm with you on that. 4.5 sounds like the right number. I think I would take the under on that. I think 4 wins is probably like I think Northwestern and Rutgers are two games that you absolutely should win. And if Odom is who we think he can be, he needs to have this team ready to beat those two teams. I think on paper, we're definitely better than Northwestern, and probably very similar to Rutgers. But you have that game at home. You got to win your home games in situations like this, and it's not much you can come to town. It's Rutgers, so you know. You gotta get that one. Then yeah, Minnesota feels like one. They'll definitely be favored, but that's one that it wouldn't be a shocking upset if Purdue got it. Again, it feels like teams of at least somewhat similar caliber. The Minnesota is definitely correctly valued ahead of Purdue right now.
Yeah, go off that. Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off, but to go off that, I kind of feel as if like the Northwestern Rutgers games are kind of if Odom is who I think he is, they win those games. If Odom is who I hope he is, they beat Minnesota as well and go 3-0 in that stretch. Is kind of how I view that.
Absolutely, I'm with you 100%. So, last thing before we get out of here, give me one bold prediction for the rest of Purdue's football season.
One bold prediction. I think there's a game where the passing game just explodes, where you see like 400 passing yards. The receivers are creating separation. They can't be covered. I'm not sure who it's against. I haven't really decided that yet. I think there's a game where the offense just kind of clicks even if it's just for a one-off game. And you see Brown make good reads. You see them limit turnovers. You see him take care of the ball. You see Maccabee have some success in the running game, and you just see the receivers just explode. I think this is a group that's kind of waiting for a game like that. I think my bold prediction is there's a game with 400 plus passing yards this year.
I like that one. I like it. I think that has a chance to hit for sure. My bold prediction, and it might be a little surprising coming off the heels of how I previewed the Notre Dame game. I think Purdue sneaks an upset against one of these ranked teams we're facing, but still misses bowl eligibility. So I think this team ends up with 5 wins, stealing one against one of these ranked teams, and probably dropping the Minnesota game. Where we get to the end of the year and we're like, man, if we had just pulled it out against Minnesota, we'd be playing a bowl game right now. But even still, we're feeling really good about the direction that Odom's heading in.
That sounds like the most Purdue conversation around football I've ever heard. Man, we got Ohio State at home, but if we could have just beaten Minnesota, we'd be bowling right now. But I feel great. I feel great about the direction of the program. But in all seriousness, 5 wins with a win over Ohio State would be a just utterly fantastic year one for Barry Odom, I think, by all accounts. And I actually would love if that happened. That'd be fantastic.
That'd be so much fun. And for the record, I do not think Ohio State is the team we're going to be able to get. I'm circling Illinois, Indiana, and maybe Washington. I feel like it's probably one of those 3. I don't think we have much of a chance at Notre Dame, at Michigan, or against Ohio State. But the other 3 at least feel like there's a world where we get them, and I think we might sneak one of them. And then that's all everyone's going to be talking about in the lead up to next football season. Remember when we beat Washington on the road? Wasn't that fun?
I really agree with you. I think that Illinois game is kind of sneaky, a better matchup than people really want to talk about. Not to kind of dwell too long on a game that's 2 weeks down the line. We can talk more about that next week. But I think that play style of that Illinois team kind of mimics what Barry Odom wants to do. And, if you get an A+ game from Purdue and against a team that does what Barry Odom wants to do, there's a world. So on that note, I think this is a fantastic, episode number 2, but episode number 1 for the rest of the Purdue world.
Absolutely. Thanks so much for being here with me, man.
Yeah, of course. I had a great time. We'll see you guys again next week. Ethan and I will talk offline. We haven't quite figured out the exact logistics of when this will go up, but we'll set a pretty specific date and time, and you'll be able to expect these coming out from us for the foreseeable future.
Hey, don't forget, basketball season's coming up.
Yeah, basketball season's coming up. That's really when it gets exciting to be a Purdue fan. So thanks everyone for tuning in. Thanks for joining me, Ethan. Have a great day, Boilers.